A question that's been on my mind recently is a question that a guitar teacher of mine asked me several years ago. And he writes his own music, and it's very good. Um, I shared some of the music that I'd written with him, and he asked me, how do I make my pieces sound like journeys or stories? I think that was his question, and it's been on my mind recently because I've decided I'd like to write a piece of music for my friend. Um, he's a war veteran and many other things. Um, he committed suicide last year, and that was in November. And he was a great guy, uh, a great leader, and something that was perhaps most pronounced was his kindness towards others, and particularly the effort that he put in to stick up for people who had been unfortunate in their life. And because he's gone, I can't return the kindness that he showed to me or our other mutual friends, but I think I could write a song and send it to his family and relatives, and that would be an act of kindness which I think he would appreciate if he was still here. So I've been thinking about writing music, and one of the ways that I come up with my music is that I have themes in my head, and sometimes the themes sound quite nice, so then I try to recreate them on the guitar. And if I'm successful, then I capture those themes and I base my improvisations around those themes. And sometimes, or in fact often, I'll often dream of music. I'll dream of symphony orchestras playing music. I'll dream of violins or pianos or guitars playing really nice solo pieces. And half the time in these dreams, the music that's in my dream is music that I've never heard in real life. So it hasn't even been written. And yet, the music is very exciting because it sounds complete or perfect. So I don't know where it comes from, but it sounds really good. So sometimes when I have those dreams, I wake up and I try to recapture some of the themes, but almost all the time, by the time I wake up, the themes are already fading from my memory, and especially the orchestral pieces, they're very hard to capture on guitar. But occasionally I've been successful and I've come up with a nice melody. And that's also how I get my melodies or themes for my music. And then I just improvise a lot. And over the course of a few days, um, it just comes together. And sometimes the process takes much longer because I'll write a piece and it won't quite sound complete. And then a few years later, I'll have some themes or melodies that are made explicit through improvisations, and then I'm able to complete those songs. And that's what I've been doing recently. Um, the song that I'm writing is based on a song that I wrote a long time ago, over 10 years ago, that was about the epic of Odysseus, the Greek hero of the Trojan War. And the Odyssey is a very famous story. It's one that's been with our civilization for 3,000 years, and it comes from the Greek bard Homer, who used to sing these poems um, in improvised in a improvisory style, and then he wrote them down, and it's a masterpiece of Western literature because the Odyssey captures the human journey almost perfectly, and the story of Odysseus is both a tragic and an inspiring one. he goes off to war. He leaves behind his family and his kingdom, and he's tested throughout his journeys many times. He's a hero of the war because he's the one that came up with the Trojan horse and the strategy to defeat the Trojans. But on his return, he's washed time and again off course and has to face countless trials and battles just to return home. And that journey takes him 20 years. And along that journey, the great pride that he's built up during the war is sort of crushed down by the gods, particularly Poseidon, who Odysseus has angered. And he has to humble himself and use his mental resources and intelligence and cunning to overcome these incredible adversities. And he's partly inspired and helped by the Greek goddess Athena, who disguises herself as his mentor. But in many ways, the Odyssey can also be seen as a metaphor for combat trauma, because essentially the whole story is about a war veteran trying to return home. And when he returns home, he finds that his kingdom's been usurped and overrun by suitors who are trying to court his wife. So he has to disguise himself as a beggar. And he disguises himself to get back into his palace and ends up killing everyone who has taken over the palace and saves his wife and his son from the suitors. So it's a pretty awesome story, but I think it's one that's definitely resonating with veterans, war veterans. And the song that I made based on that story is the one that I'm rewriting for my friend. And it's been interesting because recently I've been able to add a lot more melodies and weave everything together so that it sounds much more complete and everything flows nicely and kind of makes sense. And in the writing process, I don't usually record what I've done. I just remember it. I don't write it down either. So I just improvise several times, and then by the time I've improvised it again and again and again, it just stays stuck in my memory. Sometimes when I'm getting close to completion, I'll actually write down a map or a list of each of the different sections, and it's mainly just a reminder, like a series of dot points to tell me which section goes where. And the way that I identify them probably wouldn't be able to be understood by someone else just looking at it, because sometimes I'll give each section a name or a theme, like Odysseus or Athena or sailing, or sometimes I'll label them by the predominant technique that I'm using in a certain section. For example, slur variations around A minor with the melody in the bass. That's one of the names that I gave to one of the sections because it describes it in a technical sense, and it reminds me exactly which section it is. In terms of techniques, I don't try to write my songs to sound fancy, but to get the sound that I want, often it involves unorthodox or complicated techniques. And that's just a feature of the music which other people seem to enjoy. And I enjoy it because it provides a technical challenge for me in terms of how do I get the instrument to sound the way that it sounds in my head. So it's been very good in terms of skill development alongside traditional classical guitar playing, something that I've been doing since I was 5 years old. So I've been playing for 26, 27 years. Yeah, and I thought I'd share this because I do get a lot of questions about my compositions when I play them. So hopefully this sheds some light on the process, I guess, for posterity.